back. This is Inside Exec. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne. And today we're talking with Denis Gambi. So Fulyana's going to introduce him.
Denis is known to a lot of our listeners. People actually worked with him and for him all over the place. Denis is one of the senior financial service executives with over 20 years experience in the field. He's worked in many organisations including Citibank, AMP, Australian Wealth Management. He has a lot to offer in relation to his knowledge and expertise over that period of time. Denis is particularly known for his leadership skills and getting things done, getting results for the business, particularly when it's most difficult for others. Denis seemed to get it. So again, welcome, Denis.
Thanks, Leanne. I appreciate the introduction. Very kind words. I hope I can live up to them.
So today I think we want to talk about qualities that we would like to see in business leaders. We've previously in a podcast talked about the qualities of people that we enjoy working with. So we're going to take it further and look at the qualities that we would like to see in business leaders.
A very broad topic. Look, from my perspective, I think when you ask people, what they're looking, there's typically an extraordinarily long laundry list of things, integrity, confidence, enthusiasm, drive, so on and so forth. For me, I guess, try to distill it down a little bit, it's that notion of articulation of what they believe in, what their vision is, where they want to go, and their ability to actually bring people on that journey.
So you worked for so many different leaders and you're a leader in your own right. Thinking about the different leaders you worked for, what was the ones that you felt most engaged with? What sort of style did they have?
Definitely, I think that word engagement is a really important one. The ability, one of the things I've noticed in those leaders that I really respect is their ability to listen, observe, and then act. So they tend to engage with not just the people that work for them, but their peers and obviously people out in the marketplace. And they are able to distill a lot of information down and make it relevant. That's really important, I guess, when you're working with especially a large organisation, is, how is it relevant? So it's that notion of being able to, really make it relevant to me and actually listen to what I've got to say.
So have you worked with many that are like that?
There's been a few, typically, yeah. Going right back to when I first started, I worked for a manufacturing company many years ago prior to joining financial services, and I'd have to say their management practices at that time anyway were far in advance of anything you'd seen in financial services. And yes, they practiced that constantly. It was really a real mantra in terms of the leadership traits that these people showed, the ability to listen to their teams, their people on the ground, and then distill that information and then act upon that.
At the time, does that just make your job easier to do, or does it start to sow the seed for how you want to be a manager?
I think it does a couple of things. One, it engages me as an individual within the organisation to participate and to really be part of the journey that they're trying to go on. There's a real sense of belonging and being part of something that's really... And that's really, I think a leader has the ability of an leader to inspire that in people is one of the many important traits. So there's that aspect. In terms of making your job easier, I think it does a little bit because you know where you fit, you know what it is you're doing, you know that it's contributing to a good or greater path that you're trying to go on. So there's that aspect as well.
So it makes it, in that sense, more rewarding.
Yeah, very much so. You ultimately get that connection. You get the connection with, what I do here today, my little world, actually has meaning within the broader context of the organisation, and I can see how I contribute.
Does it make you feel like you don't need to look elsewhere for experience, for any other career moves?
Yeah, certainly whilst you have that sort of leadership, you're very much engaged, and if you're very much engaged, you tend to be very focused on what is you're doing, what the organisation is doing, how you can contribute, where you can go within the organisation. There's probably a lesser need to be looking externally. Now, as that wanes, obviously, leaders don't necessarily stay in their positions for an indefinite period of time, but so that waxes and wanes, obviously, over time.
So that's probably an interesting thing for us to look at in terms of talking about leaders today, is that what would make leaders fall off that path or stray from that path?
Well, I've been involved in a couple of those. and I'd say to you is, how can I put this? It's probably holding on to a particular way or a particular belief in terms of what it is you're doing at the time. What you've done in the past is so important for what you're going to do in the future. As distinct from, yes, it is important, but you need to take a look at what else is going on out there and bringing that into your mix. And it's sometimes very hard when you've been very successful because you've done it a number of times, and therefore you've seen that repeatable success, and so you've used methodologies. And it is hard for a leader to say, well, okay, I'll put that aside for a moment, and let me listen, or let me take a look at what else is going on out there, and bring that into my thinking. That's pretty hard when you've been very successful.
Is it that they don't get exposed to?
No, they get exposed to it.
The information they're exposed to.
They're definitely exposed to it. They're definitely
the implementation then?
Yeah, it's more the listening. I think it comes back to that. It comes back to the willingness to absorb that information and see how it's relevant to what it is you're trying to do. Because you've done, again, come back to this notion where you've been very successful, whether it's worked in the past, you should leverage that as much as you can, but not be blindsided by that, and not consider new ideas or new opportunities or new things that come around.
Which is interesting, because one of our other topics down the track is going to be about when is it a good time to take a risk.
And good leaders obviously are very, know that. One of the places I worked a couple of years ago, one of the things I found, I was dealing with some high net worth individuals. One of the things that was interesting was that although they didn't understand the deep technicalities of the financial particular product or service that we're providing, what they did understand was risk. They did understand when they needed to take risk, and because they built a successful business or they had a successful career, that was one of their key elements, is their ability to understand risk. And if you could talk to them in those terms, you ended up having a much better result.
In observing your leadership style, I've noticed one thing you do exceptionally well. You ask people, particularly when you're new with a team or your organisation, and you can ask them questions. Sometimes I know you know the answers.
Yeah.
And is that back to your listening? It's finding out what is happening here and now and what's in people's heads? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I've had an opportunity to go into a number of new organisations.
Yes.
And I know in the first 90 days I've got a particular task, and that is to really get an understanding of three primary things: the people, the business, and the customer. And the best way is you're the new boy on the block, you have a great opportunity. You can ask any question as many times as you like, and people go, oh, he's the new guy. That's okay, I'll answer it. The other thing you do get, the different opinions about the same topic. So you can ask the same question to a number of different people, and you will get a different answer. And that's really important information if you're going to be leading a substantive team, to understand, what your people are thinking, what they've experienced, and the sort of things that they might be interested in doing. And again, it's all part of a rich mix of information that a leader needs to gather, bring together, distill, and ultimately then decide what they're going to do. And you can't really do that unless you listen and you ask those questions. So I agree. The more questions you ask, the more information, the more understanding. It's better to understand than it is to be understood. Like
it's an interesting approach, because I think that there's a tendency these days for new managers to come in and need to prove themselves. Yeah. And their idea is, I'll prove myself first and then everyone will follow me, rather than the concept of being a leader by engaging the team, I guess.
Yeah, so there's one other point. It'd be interesting you say that, because one thing that just occurred to me was the reason I think I'm able to do that is the engagement I have with the person who's hired me. That's really important, and I tend to have quite a long-term engagement before I actually get appointed into a role. It just seems to happen that way. Yeah. So I get to know them pretty well, and they get to know me, and we get to be able to figure out how best to work with each other. And so we start to build some confidence in terms of our relationship that we have, which then enables me to walk into a particular organisation or a team and then spend the time. I know I've got that person's support, I know I've got my leader's support in terms of being able to go out and get that understanding before I actually act. And really, I understand the need to prove oneself. I think we constantly have to do that when we're going to a new place, and it's important. You don't want to make decisions where a few months later or a year later you have to retract or do something totally different. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily, I don't think that necessarily builds confidence. No. And especially in your team, and especially those people who are working for you.
When you said about working with who you're working with, you know them, you worked out how to work together. That's really important, because the team can sense and feel that, can't they?
Yes,
the team will know that if they come across hard times, then they know you've got their back, and you'll be able to negotiate and convince and lessen the pain, I suppose.
That's right.
And in good times, you're able to negotiate growth for your team and team members. Yeah. So if you have a good relationship with your boss, it filters down people feel secure in the right way, not secure as in forever, but secure in their work, in their recognition, in their ability to perform.
That's right. I think it's as equally as important as, those three things I came back to before I look at in terms of the people, the business and ultimately the market customers. They're all equally important in terms of building the knowledge base and building understanding of what's going on in the organisation. I guess that relationship that you have with your leader and the other senior leaders in the organisation is fundamental. Otherwise, once you lose the support or you lose the confidence, you're going to find it very, very hard. So yeah, you've got to put the time in to build those relationships, certainly with your leader, but also I don't think we should forget the other leaders in the organisation.
Right.
The other senior leaders in the organisation. It's sometimes very difficult to build those relationships because you're not always engaged with them. So it's something that needs to be worked at.
Or often at loggerheads with them.
Well, that's right. Yeah, you've got different competing priorities.
Yeah.
But if you can do that early on, if you can actually build a rapport, then maybe that helps you a little bit down the track as well when things do become difficult. The other thing too is it's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment. So, you've got a new role, you're going out there, you're discovering, you're learning, you're understanding, you're dealing with your teams, you're starting to engage with the business, do things. You get so caught up with that what gets put aside is the time you need to spend on building relationships.
What about when coming into a team that you have the sense is uncohesive, shall we say? That approach of talking to them first gives you a sense of...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, you really don't want to be making comments on changes or potential, what might come in the future. What you really do need to do is find out, what people are thinking, where the pain points are, where potential recalcitrants live and why they have that particular behaviour attitude. And the other part too is I think you need to give people the opportunity to change. When you come into a team and it is dysfunctional, there is no doubt a reason for that. You need to find out what that is. Can you change it? Can you alter it? Can people change their behaviours? Yes, they absolutely can.
And can change their opinions of you too. I know I've used the same system and I went into a team that I knew was not working well together. And had been warned that they weren't working well together. So I thought, well, I'll just sit down and talk to each of them individually to start with and see what happens. And the overriding comment I got from the two who were the troublemakers was, well, we didn't think you'd talk to us.
Exactly right.
And I said it up front, and all of a sudden there was a whole different approach because they couldn't pinpoint me, they couldn't put me into a box and say, well, she's this kind of manager.
Right, exactly.
We're going to have to rethink the whole strategy now.
I had the exact same experience a couple of years ago. I walked into a team and the first 2 weeks all I did was sit down with the team members and start talking to them, and I got exactly the same comments. It was, we didn't expect you to talk to us first.
So what's coming through first of all is this ability to listen and then to take the measured action after that.
That's right. Ultimately you need to make your own stamp. You have a particular view on the way things should work and you need to assert that particular view at various times. So it's a matter of distilling the information and understanding that you gather along the way and being able to then articulate that back to the team. That's pretty important too, is if you are going to take a certain course of action, as a leader, you absolutely need to be able to articulate that and enthuse people about it. Get people confident that it's the right path, that it's the path that they should come along and that they want to actually join that particular journey.
Steps along the way and the result at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Is there a place for entrepreneurship in business leaders?
Oh, absolutely. It has to be measured in larger organisations. Obviously, with larger organisations, there's a hell of a lot more bureaucracy, as you would expect. So the level of entrepreneurship will vary considerably.
So how does someone with that entrepreneurial flair move through the bureaucracy? How do they get to a leadership position? Because to my mind, it gets knocked out of them at every, a little bit gets knocked off at every level that they move through.
It can do, it does, but there are some, thinking about one particular organisation, where they do cultivate that pretty well.
Is it something that you'd like to see in business leaders?
Of course, there are not right moments for it.
Right organisations?
We're talking about large organisations here. Obviously, the small and medium size. Today, I work for a fairly small organisation, and you have no choice but to have far stronger entrepreneurial bent. So you need to demonstrate that a lot more. You need to exercise that particular bent a lot. But in the larger organisations, I'd say that there is a time and place for it. And you probably need to be a bit more patient. And that's not necessarily a particular characteristic that entrepreneurs always have, which is understandable. But then you're walking into a large organisation, you've got to realise it's a bureaucracy, right? And it has to be too. I mean, when you're talking
it does.
10, 20, 30,000 people in a large financial organisation, There has to be processes, systems. There has to be things that you wrap around the way the organisation sets its boundaries. It has to be fairly clear.
Within that, though, you can actually break in new bits, if you know what I mean, right? An entrepreneur will do big bang things, but an entrepreneur within an organisation will take the risk, calculated risk, and their ability to convince the sign-off, whoever they are, global in some cases, is to get the sign-off to actually try something new, calculate the risk and say, well, if that doesn't work, what's the worst thing that can happen to our reputation, our client, whatever it is. So sometimes you have to be satisfied with doing big, important bits rather than one big piece.
Yes, I agree. That's right. It'd be more in that vein in a large organisation.
Yes.
Although then again, I had an opportunity to work for an investment bank some time ago, and it's a very different beast, I have to say. Very high intellect, extraordinary intellect throughout the probably most of the senior organisation. Not a huge amount of common sense, but that's a different story.
Blokes, eh? Or men?
Pretty much. That's about it. But the reason they had been so successful was because of the risks they were willing to take.
Right.
And they weren't foolish risks.
No, but within their industry, they were risks.
Yes, that's right.
In terms
and
of
they
what everyone else was doing.
they were very clear on being able to articulate those risks, so they understood them.
So so far we've got listening and a little bit of a touch of entrepreneurship.
All that's good, but the other thing I was saying before was that bit of ability to communicate, the articulation of the vision. If you cannot enthuse people as to where you're going, they're not going to come with you. You can only order people to do things for a certain period of time, after which people are going to go, enough, I don't need to listen to this. Or you can go the other way and try to actually engage them in the journey that you're trying to go on. It's that communication, that ability to articulate where it is you want to go and bring people along that journey. I think that is fundamental for a
You inject the passion.
Yes, absolutely, that's right.
And carry it through, because a lot of these times we're talking years and years of projects.
It takes a long time. It doesn't happen in a short space. No, exactly right.
You also mentioned inspiring, being inspiring was one of the words you used earlier. And this is really about showing people what the vision and that it's doable and keep stretching. And just people get basically bored with routine. They get bored with just continuously doing the same thing, still getting the targets and the results.
Right.
So they want someone to show them something new that they haven't thought of, and they didn't think it was possible.
So where there's a challenge, even if it's just the incremental changes.
I think the other thing Fulyana's alluding to is pushing people to. A good leader will know how to push people. To push that envelope, to get them to strive or to achieve that thing that they didn't think they were going to be able to do. That's not easy to do, but it's one of those real key traits, I think, that are really one of the top performing leaders.
And I think that the whole area of being able to engage people and encourage them and move them with passion to where you're going is one that we could talk about every week if we wanted to. The area that interests me most, though, is where we're talking big organisations. You're obviously going to get people within those organisations who don't want to, for whatever reason. Maybe it's external influences, nothing to do with work. Love coming in and like the people, but they just can't motivate themselves to move forward with this vision. They can see the benefits, they know all of those things are going to happen. How do you isolate them from infecting the rest of the group and still recognise that they've got something to contribute?
Yeah, that's right. They do. So you can't have everyone in the organisation being enthused and passionate and top performing. That just doesn't happen. So you're going to get groups. You're going to get those people that you need to be there to do the day-to-day functions that the business needs to perform in order for it to exist on an ongoing basis on a day-to-day. How do you isolate them? I don't think you want to isolate them. I think you want to recognise the contribution they make and ensure that they remain engaged at a level that they're comfortable with and that the organisation is comfortable with, and if it's not, then it has to act.
And you recognise that what they're doing is becoming an expert in that particular task. It's like this fellow you talked about that we saw here this morning.
That's right.
21 years doing this because he's consistently good at that.
Yes.
Despite the changes that have happened around him, complete changes to the organisation and its focus and the way it does it. In 21 years to do a task that is, whilst it's part of the overall feel of what is being provided, is not a line function necessarily.
That's right.
Is a good effort.
Oh, it is, and you know, this individual is a frontline individual. He talks and deals with clients on a day-in, day-out basis. So he's right there at the coalface, and he's an incredibly important individual. And I think the organisation has effectively recognised.
Obviously, the organisation has recognised that role and the way he performs it can't be changed, can't be bettered, and that they still need it.
You know, he does the same thing day in, day out. I'd argue that, but anyway.
Because every day is so different.
Exactly.
Basically. Yeah.
But he adds an incredible amount of value, given his consistency, his reliability, and the way he goes about what he does. And you want to cultivate that. You need those sort of people.
And so the contribution is still part of the vision.
Exactly. Absolutely right. And you know, you can use those people too. I mean, when ultimately, you know, after you've gone through the whole process and you've articulated your vision, you need people to enact that. You know, as a leader at the top, you can't do it by yourself. You need to enthuse people, but you need also people to be able to respond to that and be able to enact that effectively.
So how then, as a leader, I can ask both of you this, do you identify what things you're going to do, what things you can carry through, what skills are, you know what your skill set is, but what are the things, how do you identify what you're going to do and what you're going to get others within the team to do in terms of moving everybody forward?
Think about that a little bit. Look, that's something that I think for a leader, they have to think about every day, how they're going to do that.
Which is probably what I was looking at, that it's not something that you sit down and do this little test and you get these results and this is my way forward, that it is something you'd have to think about every day.
I guess while you're saying that occurred to me, I was thinking of a leader I used to work for some years back, how they did that. And I have to say, for that individual, again, that process of each and every day listening to people and talking with them and engaging, not either spending all their time doing one particular thing, which either sitting at the desk or talking to clients only, but ensuring that they get around to all their constituents, I think was really important for that person. And it enabled the people to start to get a feel and understanding of what it is they're trying to do. Because ultimately, sometimes, you know, when you do finally decide, okay, this is the vision, this is where I want to go, you need to then to break all that down, and, you know, from a strategy perspective to the tactical things that you're going to do. Then how do you actually implement those at the lowest level? That takes an amazing amount of time to actually implement and to start delivering the results. So I think that's probably, that's what I'd say.
I agree with that. I think that by walking around and talking to people, you're able to figure out what stage they're at, particularly when it's the person with the vision, like you're in the leadership role. And then you get them excited because you handle their objections in a very informal manner. So if they have something against what you're doing, they feel comfortable because you're approachable, it's informal. They're happy to tell you without risk of, you know, and you've got to be sure that you don't take it against them because they went against what you're saying. So you encourage them and then you explain it to them. You explain it of why we're doing that and take on board what they're saying. So in doing that, you'll find that they will eventually either come on board and be part of that enthusiasm and passion to deliver to that vision, or they still skeptical about it, but they respect you enough to say, look, you made the effort, you believe it, I trust you, you did everything, you respected me and my views, so I'll do my bit.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground already today. We're going to take a break now and we'll be back with you again soon. I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, we're talking with Denis Gambi, and this is Inside Exec.